Hello everyone and welcome back to the sixth debate lecture. Today we're going to learn how debates are judged. Now this is not going to be a lecture for judges. This is a lecture for debaters, but because it's good to know how debates are judged so that you can know how they judge and therefore get a higher chance of winning the debate. So how are debates judged? They're basically judged by clashes. Clashes, the same stuff that whips do. And after the judges create the clashes, the way they create, first of all, the way they find the clashes is A, clashes that are explicitly given in the debate. So if the whip said that this is a clash, or the deputy said that these are obvious clashes, if the reply or the first speaker, even the first speaker maybe, said that these are obvious clashes, then the judge will, if it's not ridiculous, if the judge agrees that it was indeed a clash, then the judge will write it down. However, there are cases where the whip is not super clear about clashes, I guess in a low quality debate, or there are cases where the whip says it's a clash, but the judge doesn't agree. The judge thinks that there's a better clash. In that case, the clash would be any implicit clash in the debate. So any comparison that was made within the debate, implicit might not be the wrong word, but I would just say discussions that formed clash in the debate. So any material that clash between each other, that would be a clash that the judge decides would be the clash. Or if there were no weighing or any comparisons like at all, then the judge would just have to weigh by oneself. Have to weigh in discussion. So you get what I mean. The judge finds the clashes within the debate. Now, after finding the clashes, the judge finds the weighing. The judge decides the verdict of the clashes. So clash one, two, three are made. The judge decides which team has won which clash. For example, the judge can say government side won clash one, and the government side lost clash two and three. However, one thing that I would note here is that just because a team has won numerically more clashes than the other team, it does not mean that they win. They might win, but it's not automatic. Because the reason is, if one team wins a very important clash, then they might win the debate, even if they have numerically won less clashes than the other team. So after deciding the verdict of the clashes, then two things would matter: is the margin of the clashes, margin of the win, and the importance of the clash. So the margin of the win is simple. So, for example, if a team had a way stronger mechanism than the other team had, then it would be very clear that that team has won the clash clearly. If both teams had a similar level of persuasiveness in the mechanism, then the margin of the win would be nebulous. Or even if it's not nebulous, even if it's clear who won, the margin itself would be small. Next, the importance of the clash would be how important the clash is. So, how important the clash was weighed in. Um, this thing, importance of the clash, is usually explicitly talked about in the debate. The whip or the deputy or any speaker would say that this clash is important, and the judge will evaluate that, and if that is legitimate, then they will agree that it is important. In some debates that are lower in quality, the speakers will not make it clear which clash is important. Then the judge would just have to decide what was implicitly treated as important. So the margin of the win and the importance of the clash would be what the judges are looking for. And obviously, then the winner of the debate would be A, the team needs to win at least one clash. And if the clashes that they won are clear, have a clear margin, and are important, then they are going to win the debate. You might be thinking, hey, that's a bit unclear. It's a bit more clear if the team that wins more clashes win. But it just simply is not that clear because judging at the end of the day is very subjective. Even though we try to be objective, it is subjective. And therefore, there are cases where it looks unfair, but that's the best that judges do. And for example, it does get a bit unclear, or yeah, it does get a bit unsure to decide who won the debate. If, for example, Team Prop won an unimportant clash, but in a very clear margin, and then Team Op won a very important clash with a slight margin, then it does become a bit nebulous, and then it becomes harder to decide the winner. But that would be the discretion of the judge. Speaking of the discretion of the judge, let's talk about how that happens. How does the judge decide a debate? First of all, they're impartial. They don't have personal opinions on any issue. And they also don't have a specific preference over debate styles. So the judge can't be like, oh, my personal preference influenced that. That's not allowed. If that's implicit, since they're human, it might happen, of course, in the real world, but they're not supposed to. And it is very explicitly said that judges should not intervene in the debate. So what does the judge do? Instead of intervening with their own preference, they evaluate impartially how persuasive each speaker was. And from this is just how good the debater was. Like, for example, logic, impact, like those type of stuff. So when we're saying that they're being impartial, it doesn't mean that they're believing in everything. It means that they're evaluating something fairly. And one more thing is that judges are not an expert in anything. And of course, they might be an expert in debating, but they're not an expert in a specific topic. So, for example, they cannot be an expert in politics or sports or history or anything. What they have is a base level knowledge on every subject. And a standard that is often used to describe the base level of knowledge is knowing the titles news. So just up to the extent of knowing the title of news. So, for example, they would know that Jordan is a Middle Eastern country. They would know that Trump is the president and how Trump is being talked about a lot in the world. And that's going to be some basic level of knowledge that they know. So the reason that this is inside of the rules of being a judge is that let's say that the motion is about the FIFA World Cup, and the team says that a FIFA World Cup is something that happens, um, and they talk about very specific about like a certain player scoring a goal and how that impacted the footballing world. If the judge is a football nerd, then he might be like, "Hey, you lied, so I'm going to take points off of that." But that would be kind of unfair because then you would be penalized for since you have met a judge that is a football nerd, and if you met a different judge, then you won't be penalized. So you don't want to make that. And same thing, if you met a politics nerd judge and the judge is like, hey, I know politics, and the thing that you talked about, that example was exaggerated. So we don't want that to happen. We want the judge to be an impartial person with only a base level of knowledge. So that's why they are not an expert in this case. And that's basically it. I forgot to tell you one thing. This person, this not an expert person, is called an average intelligent voter, or sometimes called an ordinary intelligent voter. I guess I guess some debaters call them ordinary intelligent to not say the word average. So these are basically what a judge is. Now, that's all you need to know as a debater, but I would also want to tell you that a judge scores your individual scores too. So the same judge that decides the team verdicts will score your individual scores. But we'll talk about individual scores in another lecture. But for today, these are how judges judge a verdict. Thank you.